sometimes a single decision in a snowstorm can change two lives forever. The wind howled across Interstate 80 like a living thing, pushing walls of snow across the highway and reducing visibility to almost nothing. Most drivers had already abandoned the road hours earlier, choosing safety over risk as one of the worst winter storms of the season swept through Wyoming. Hannah Brooks tightened her grip on the steering wheel and leaned forward, trying to see beyond the dancing curtain of snow illuminated by her headlights. Her aging pickup truck rattled with every gust. She should have been home already. Instead, she was crawling along the highway after finishing a double shift at the roadside diner where she worked 6 days a week. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders, but so did responsibility. Her father was waiting at home, recovering from a recent illness that had left him unable to work. Every dollar mattered. Every hour mattered. Hannah could not afford to miss work, and she certainly could not afford unexpected problems. A bright warning flashed across her dashboard as another gust slammed into the truck. She glanced nervously at the fuel gauge. Not ideal. The nearest highway stop was still several miles away. Then something appeared through the storm. At first she thought it was a reflection. A trick of the weather. But as she moved closer, she realized it was a dark SUV sitting partially off the shoulder of the road. Its hazard lights blinked weakly through the snow. Hannah immediately felt her stomach tighten. Common sense told her to keep driving. The storm was worsening by the minute. Stopping could create problems for both vehicles. Besides, she had responsibilities waiting at home. Yet as she passed the stranded SUV, she caught sight of a figure standing beside it. A man. Alone. His coat was covered with snow. The wind nearly pushed him sideways. Hannah drove another 100 yards before her conscience won the argument. "Oh, come on," she muttered to herself as she slowed the truck. She turned around at the next emergency pull-off and carefully drove back through the storm. When she stopped beside the SUV, the man looked genuinely surprised. Hannah lowered her window a few inches. Freezing air rushed inside instantly. "Are you okay?" she called. The man stepped closer. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with sharp features partially hidden beneath snow and ice. "I will be," he answered with a faint smile. "Eventually." Even in the middle of a blizzard, his calmness seemed unusual. Hannah glanced toward the disabled vehicle. "Your car?" He nodded. "Engine failure. Roadside assistance?" "Hours away." Hannah looked at the empty highway. No traffic. No help. Nothing but snow and darkness. The logical choice would have been to apologize and leave. Instead, she unlocked the passenger door. "There is a highway stop 5 miles ahead," she said. "Get in." For a moment the stranger simply stared at her as if nobody had offered him help in a very long time. Then he climbed into the truck. Neither of them knew it yet, but that simple act of kindness had just set an extraordinary story into motion. The highway stop looked like a tiny island of light surrounded by an endless ocean of snow. Hannah parked beside the building and shut off her truck, relieved they had made it safely. The stranger stepped out and helped brush snow from the windshield before following her inside. Warm air immediately greeted them as they entered. The smell of fresh coffee and grilled food filled the room. Only a handful of travelers remained, all waiting for the storm to pass. Hannah removed her red-knitted scarf and draped it over a chair. The stranger glanced at it before taking a seat across from her. Up close, he appeared exhausted. His hands were cold, and traces of snow still clung to his dark coat. A waitress approached the table and handed them menus. Hannah quietly opened her wallet while the stranger studied the menu. Her heart sank. After paying for fuel earlier that day, she had very little left. Just enough for a simple meal and a hot drink. She hesitated for a second. Then she looked at the man sitting across from her. He had no transportation, no clear way forward, and no place to go until the storm ended. The decision became easy. "Order whatever you need," she said. The stranger looked up. "You do not have to do that." Hannah smiled. I know. Several minutes later, 2 steaming cups of coffee and a pair of hot meals arrived. The stranger stared at the food almost as if he had forgotten what kindness looked like. Thank you, he said quietly. Most people would have kept driving. Hannah laughed softly. Most people probably have more common sense than I do. That earned a genuine smile from him. For the next hour they talked while snow continued falling outside the large windows. The stranger introduced himself only as Ethan. He never mentioned a company, wealth, or anything about his background. Instead, he asked questions. Lots of questions. He wanted to know about Hannah's family, her work, and her dreams. At first she found it unusual. Then she found herself opening up. She told him about her father. About the diner. About how she once dreamed of finishing college but put everything on hold when her family needed help. Ethan listened carefully to every word. Unlike most people, he never interrupted. He never checked a phone. He never seemed distracted. It was as if her story genuinely mattered to him. Eventually Hannah laughed and pointed at him. You have asked me 20 questions, but I still know almost nothing about you. Ethan smiled into his coffee. Maybe I am just a better listener. Or maybe you are avoiding answers. For a brief moment something unreadable crossed his face. Then he simply shrugged. Maybe. Hours passed. The storm outside slowly weakened. Midnight came and went. Before leaving, Hannah stood and wrapped the red scarf around her neck again. Ethan watched quietly. That scarf seems important. Hannah smiled. My mother made it before she passed away. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. As they prepared to leave, neither realized that the red scarf, the hot coffee, and this simple night inside a highway stop would soon become memories neither of them would ever forget. The sun began to rise, casting a pale winter light over the snow-covered highway as Hannah drove home the next morning, exhausted yet quietly satisfied that she had helped the stranded stranger. Thoughts of the previous night kept replaying in her mind, the way he had sat quietly, listening intently to her stories, his calm demeanor in contrast to the storm outside, and the small, almost unnoticed gestures of gratitude he had shown. She could not shake the feeling that their meeting was far from ordinary. Pulling into the driveway of her small apartment, she noticed the delicate tracks of her tires in the fresh snow and took a deep breath of the crisp air. Inside, her father was still asleep, the heat of the small wood stove filling the room with a comforting warmth. Hannah quietly prepared a simple breakfast, her mind wandering back to the stranger she had rescued. Ethan, he had said his name was Ethan, yet he had shared nothing else of himself. She wondered why someone so composed and courteous could be stranded in such a storm, and why he had seemed so genuinely interested in the stories of her life. As she cleared the dishes, her phone buzzed with a notification from the diner where she worked, reminding her of her next shift. Even with the fatigue in her body, a small thrill ran through her as she thought about the stranger, the snowy highway, and the red scarf draped over the chair in the diner that evening. Later, while driving to work through the remnants of the blizzard, she passed the stretch of highway where she had found Ethan and felt an unexpected sense of connection, as though the landscape itself remembered their encounter. In the diner, the familiar hum of early morning customers, clattering dishes, and steaming coffee created a comforting rhythm. Hannah moved through her tasks efficiently, yet every glance toward the window made her think about the man she had helped. Hours passed and she served regulars and newcomers alike, but her thoughts returned repeatedly to Ethan, his attentiveness, and the quiet dignity with which he had received her help. During a brief moment alone, she pulled the red scarf from her bag and touched it gently, remembering how carefully he had folded it before leaving, as if even the smallest token mattered. She could not imagine what life awaited him beyond the snowbound highway, and she could not foresee that this single act of kindness had set in motion events that would forever change both of their lives, though at that moment all she could do was continue with her day, carrying the warmth of the previous night's human connection in her heart, unaware that the encounter was only the first chapter of a remarkable story that would soon unfold in ways she could never anticipate, intertwining her fate with that of a hidden billionaire CEO in ways neither of them yet realized. The next morning, Hannah could not shake the memory of the stranger from her thoughts. She replayed the scene on the snowbound highway, the exhausted man standing in the blizzard, and the way he had accepted her help with quiet gratitude. At the diner, she went about her shift, serving regulars and newcomers, but every glance at the frosted windows reminded her of that night. Hours later, a small envelope arrived at her apartment, addressed in crisp, elegant handwriting. It was an invitation to a Chicago community program she had never heard of before. Curiosity and apprehension mingled as she read the details, explaining that selected candidates would be considered for a special leadership position in a charitable foundation. The instructions were clear, the timing impeccable, and Hannah could not fathom who had sent it. That evening, she shared the envelope with her father, who smiled softly, noting that perhaps life had ways of rewarding courage and compassion in ways they could not predict. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Ethan Walker reviewed reports in his corporate office, contemplating the week ahead. His eyes lingered on a folded red scarf, neatly placed on his desk. He remembered the way it had hung around her neck, the warmth it represented in a freezing night. For him, that single act of kindness had revealed something rare, a heart willing to act without expectation. By late evening, Hannah packed for the trip to Chicago, still uncertain whether the invitation was a coincidence or a deliberate choice by someone who had witnessed her actions. She wondered if the stranger she had helped would play any role in this unexpected opportunity. On the road to the train station, the landscape passed in a blur of snow and early winter twilight, each mile carrying anticipation and unease. She kept checking the envelope, rereading the instructions, imagining what lay ahead. In Chicago, Ethan prepared for the arrival of new candidates, reviewing profiles and details he had collected over weeks, careful to remain anonymous until the right moment. His mind wandered back to the night on the highway, recalling her steady hands, her determination, and the subtle warmth that had penetrated his usually guarded demeanor. Across the city, Hannah stepped off the train into the crisp evening air, her breath visible in small clouds, and looked around at the unfamiliar streets lined with festive lights and bustling traffic. She clutched the envelope, feeling the weight of potential change, unaware that the person who had begun this chain of events would soon reveal himself, forever altering the trajectory of her life, and that the story that had started on a snowbound highway was only just beginning to unfold in ways more extraordinary than she could have imagined. The following morning, Hannah stood in the lobby of one of the tallest buildings she had ever seen. Glass walls stretched toward the ceiling while executives and employees moved confidently through the polished marble entrance. Everything about Chicago felt bigger, faster, and more intimidating than the quiet Wyoming town she called home. She adjusted her coat, checked the invitation one more time, and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, her reflection stared back at her. She reminded herself that she had earned the right to be there. The elevator climbed higher and higher until it finally opened onto an executive floor overlooking the city skyline. A receptionist greeted her warmly and directed her toward a conference room where several other candidates were already waiting. Most appeared polished and experienced. Some discussed business strategies. Others reviewed notes on tablets and laptops. Hannah suddenly felt out of place. She had spent the last few years serving coffee, balancing bills, and helping care for her father. Compared to everyone else in the room, she felt ordinary. Yet something inside her urged her to stay. One by one, candidates were called into the conference room. The waiting area grew quieter as time passed. Finally, a receptionist smiled and said, "Miss Brooks, they are ready for you now." Hannah stood, smoothed her jacket, and followed the woman down a long hallway lined with framed photographs of community projects and charitable initiatives. Every picture seemed to tell a story about people helping other people. The sight gave her a little more confidence. Then the conference room doors opened. Hannah stepped inside and immediately stopped walking. Her breath caught. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. At the far end of the table sat the man from the snowstorm. The same calm eyes. The same composed expression. The same stranger she had rescued on a frozen highway weeks earlier. Only now he was wearing an impeccably tailored suit, seated among senior executives and board members. The room fell silent. Hannah stared at him in complete disbelief. For several seconds, neither moved. Then the man slowly stood. A faint smile appeared on his face. "Good morning, Hannah." The sound of his voice confirmed what her eyes already knew. It was him. Every executive in the room looked between them, confused by the unexpected reaction. Hannah finally found her voice. "Ethan." The man nodded. "Yes." Then he extended a hand toward the seat across from him. "Although around here, most people call me Ethan Walker." Hannah felt her pulse accelerate. The name was instantly recognizable. Ethan Walker was the founder and chief executive officer of Walker Freight, one of the largest logistics companies in the country. Articles had been written about him. Interviews had featured him. His company employed thousands of people. The realization hit her all at once. The stranded traveler from the blizzard had never been an ordinary stranger. He was a billionaire CEO. As Hannah stood frozen in the center of the room, Ethan's smile softened. "I have been looking forward to seeing you again." And in that moment, she realized that the mysterious invitation, the trip to Chicago, and the night on the Snowbound highway had never been separate events. They had all been leading to this reveal. Hannah somehow managed to take the seat Ethan had indicated, although her thoughts were moving far faster than she could control. The boardroom, the executives, the breathtaking view of Chicago beyond the windows, all of it faded into the background. The only thing she could focus on was the man sitting across from her. Ethan Walker. The billionaire chief executive officer whose company operated across the country. The same man she had picked up during a blizzard and bought coffee for with money she could barely spare. One of the executives cleared his throat and began discussing the leadership program, but Hannah struggled to absorb the details. Eventually Ethan leaned forward and spoke directly to her. "Relax, Hannah. This is not a test." A few people around the table smiled politely. Hannah finally found enough composure to answer. "Then why am I here?" Ethan exchanged a glance with several board members before responding. "Because I believe opportunities should be given to people with character, not just impressive resumes." The room grew noticeably quieter. Ethan continued. "The night we met, you had every reason to keep driving. The weather was dangerous. You were tired. You had responsibilities waiting at home. Yet you stopped anyway." Hannah shifted uncomfortably. Anyone would have done that. Several executives quietly shook their heads. Ethan smiled. "No. Most people did not." The statement carried a weight that surprised her. Ethan then explained the purpose of the program. Walker Freight Foundation was expanding community outreach initiatives throughout rural America. They needed leaders who understood real challenges, not just statistics on reports. The position involved helping communities facing economic hardship, supporting local programs, and creating partnerships with organizations that served struggling families. As Ethan described the mission, Hannah realized the work sounded surprisingly personal. It reflected many of the difficulties she had experienced herself. For the first time since entering the room, her nervousness began to fade. Questions followed. Board members asked about her experiences caring for her father, balancing multiple responsibilities, and helping customers at the diner. Unlike traditional interviews, nobody seemed interested in corporate buzzwords or rehearsed answers. They wanted honesty. By the end of the meeting, Hannah felt more confident than she had all morning. Then Ethan made an announcement that stunned her once again. "The foundation would like to offer you a position." Hannah blinked. "A position?" Ethan nodded. "Community Development Associate." She stared at him in disbelief. "You are serious?" A few executives laughed warmly. Ethan's smile widened. "Completely serious." Hannah looked down at the offer packet placed in front of her. The salary was more money than she had ever earned. The benefits would help her father. The opportunity could completely transform her future. Yet before she could respond, she noticed several people at the far end of the table exchanging uncertain looks. One woman in particular seemed far from pleased. Her nameplate read Lauren Pierce, Senior Director. The expression on Lauren's face lasted only a moment before disappearing behind a professional smile, but Hannah noticed it. Something about it felt cold. Ethan stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to Walker Freight Foundation, Hannah." Slowly, she rose and shook his hand. The executives applauded politely. It should have been a perfect moment. Yet as Hannah glanced toward Lauren once more, she could not shake the feeling that not everyone in the company believed she belonged there. And she had no idea that the greatest challenge of her new journey was about to begin. Hannah's first weeks at Walker Freight Foundation felt like stepping into an entirely different world. Every morning she walked through the towering glass headquarters and reminded herself that she belonged there just as much as anyone else. Yet proving it would not be easy. The whispers started almost immediately. Some employees assumed she had received special treatment because Ethan personally supported her hiring. Others quietly questioned whether a former diner waitress from Wyoming could handle responsibilities inside a national organization. Hannah heard the comments but refused to let them distract her. Instead of seeking shortcuts, she volunteered for every difficult assignment she could find. She arrived early, stayed late, and spent evenings studying community development programs so she could learn as quickly as possible. The foundation's mission mattered to her, and she was determined to earn every opportunity through hard work. One afternoon, she was assigned to help coordinate a rural assistance initiative designed to support struggling towns during severe winter conditions. The project immediately caught her attention because it reminded her of home. While reviewing reports, she noticed several logistical issues that could delay emergency supplies reaching isolated communities. Rather than simply forwarding concerns to a supervisor, she spent hours researching alternative routes and contacting local partners. By the next morning, she had prepared a complete proposal outlining solutions. During a planning meeting, Hannah nervously presented her recommendations. The room remained quiet as executives reviewed the information. To her surprise, several team members nodded in agreement. The proposal was practical, affordable, and based on real-world experience. Even employees who had doubted her began paying closer attention. Across the room, Ethan listened without interrupting. He recognized the same determination he had seen on the Snowbound highway. When the presentation ended, he simply said, "Excellent work." The compliment was brief, but it carried weight. Not everyone appreciated the growing respect Hannah was earning. Lauren Pierce watched the meeting from the far end of the table with increasing frustration. For years she had worked her way through the organization, building influence and authority. Now an outsider seemed to be gaining attention faster than expected. Although Lauren remained professional in public, her attitude toward Hannah grew noticeably colder. Meanwhile, Hannah continued focusing on the work itself. She spent time speaking directly with community leaders, listening to concerns, and learning how foundation programs affected real families. The more she listened, the more passionate she became about helping people. Employees began noticing her willingness to take responsibility rather than seek recognition. Gradually, perception started changing. One evening, after a particularly successful planning session, Ethan found Hannah reviewing reports alone in a conference room. Snow drifted outside the windows, reminding both of them of the night they first met. "You know," Ethan said with a faint smile, "most people would have taken advantage of special treatment if they thought they had it." Hannah looked up from her paperwork. "I do not want special treatment." Ethan nodded. "I know." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. Then Hannah smiled. "I just want the chance to prove I belong here." Ethan looked at her thoughtfully. "You already are." Those simple words stayed with her long after he left the room. Yet neither of them realized that while trust and respect were growing stronger between them, someone else was quietly preparing a challenge that could threaten everything Hannah had worked so hard to build. Hannah had begun to feel more confident in her role, yet the tension around her was growing in ways she could not control. Lauren Pierce's subtle glances and carefully phrased questions made it clear that not everyone in the office welcomed her presence. One morning, Hannah arrived at the Foundation's headquarters to find a large project proposal sitting on her desk, accompanied by notes that hinted at hidden challenges. The assignment involved coordinating multiple community initiatives during harsh winter conditions, testing her organizational skills, problem-solving, and ability to manage volunteer teams remotely. Undeterred, Hannah methodically mapped out a plan, contacting local leaders, verifying supply chains, and preparing contingency strategies. Meanwhile, Lauren monitored her progress from a distance, whispering concerns to other staff members and subtly attempting to undermine Hannah's credibility. Despite this, Hannah remained focused, determined to succeed through competence rather than favoritism. By midweek, her initiatives were gaining momentum, volunteers were reporting smoothly running operations, and towns receiving support began noting improvements in efficiency. Employees who had been skeptical were now observing her approach with growing respect. Ethan watched from his office, quietly reviewing reports and noting Hannah's increasing confidence and capability. He recognized the same determination and resilience he had seen during the snowstorm that first brought them together. When he walked into the main operations room, he found Hannah discussing scheduling with team leaders, calmly handling questions and offering solutions. He nodded approvingly. "You have a natural talent for this," he said softly. Hannah looked up and smiled, grateful for his encouragement but careful to remain professional. The day ended with a meeting to review progress. Even Lauren had to acknowledge the results, though her disapproval remained beneath a carefully maintained exterior. Outside, snow began to fall lightly, reminding Hannah of the night she had first met Ethan, of the cold highway, the stranded vehicle, and the simple act of helping someone in need. That memory fueled her commitment. Little did she know, while she had been building trust, gaining competence, and quietly earning respect, Lauren was already preparing a move that could jeopardize the stability of the Foundation's winter programs. Hannah's ability to navigate both operational challenges and interpersonal conflicts would soon be tested, but for the moment, she allowed herself a rare sense of accomplishment, knowing that persistence, integrity, and kindness were gradually reshaping her place in the organization and strengthening the bond with the man whose presence had forever altered the course of her life. The trouble began quietly. At first it was nothing more than whispers in hallways and conversations that suddenly stopped when Hannah entered a room. Then came the anonymous messages. Someone had started spreading rumors throughout the Foundation, claiming that Hannah's rapid success had nothing to do with hard work and everything to do with her personal connection to Ethan. The gossip moved quickly through departments, growing more exaggerated with each retelling. Hannah noticed the change immediately. Employees who had once greeted her warmly became distant. Invitations to meetings arrived later than usual. Important information occasionally failed to reach her desk. At first she tried to ignore it. She focused on her projects and reminded herself that results mattered more than opinions. Yet the rumors continued spreading. One afternoon she entered a conference room and accidentally overheard two employees discussing her. They fell silent the moment they saw her standing there. The awkwardness confirmed what she already suspected. For the first time since arriving in Chicago, self-doubt began creeping into her thoughts. Had people ever truly respected her work? Or had they simply assumed she was receiving special treatment all along? Meanwhile, Lauren Pierce carefully maintained her professional image while quietly encouraging the speculation. She never directly accused Hannah of anything. Instead, she asked questions. She suggested possibilities. She allowed others to draw conclusions on their own. It was a strategy that protected her from blame while accomplishing exactly what she wanted. One evening, Hannah remained alone in the office reviewing reports long after most employees had gone home. The city lights shimmered beyond the windows as snow drifted gently through the darkness. She stared at the documents in front of her but struggled to concentrate. The rumors hurt more than she wanted to admit. Every achievement suddenly felt questioned. Every success seemed diminished. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to find Ethan standing in the doorway. He immediately noticed the exhaustion on her face. "You are still here?" he asked. Hannah attempted a smile. "Apparently so are you." Ethan stepped inside and took a seat across from her. For a moment neither spoke. Then he quietly asked, "What is really bothering you?" Hannah hesitated before finally answering. Do you ever wonder if people see your work or only the story they want to believe? Ethan understood immediately. He had already heard fragments of the rumors circulating through the company. People often choose simple explanations over uncomfortable truths, he said. Hannah looked down at the table. Maybe they are right. Maybe none of this would have happened if I had not met you. Ethan shook his head firmly. No. This happened because you earned it. His voice carried absolute certainty. The snowstorm gave us an introduction. Everything after that came from your choices. Hannah wanted to believe him. Deep down, part of her did. Yet before either could say more, Ethan's phone buzzed with an urgent notification. He glanced at the screen and his expression changed instantly. A major winter relief project supporting several remote communities had suddenly encountered serious logistical problems. Supplies were delayed. Volunteers were stranded. Critical deadlines were at risk. The Foundation's largest seasonal initiative was on the verge of failure. And within hours, Hannah would find herself at the center of a crisis that could either destroy her reputation completely or finally prove her worth to everyone.